to Dan for yet another great Zoom seminar. It's been a lot of fun. Ollie, good to see you. Oscar, everybody, know quite a few of you. I am Fred, K9VV in the Virgin Islands. I'm the section manager here. I think it's the 4th or 5th term. So one of those old tired wireless dogs like many of you folks. I come from the comms and the wireless arena with a lot of years and moved down to the VI here about 10 years ago. So been here long enough to kind of get the lay of the land and know what's going on. Prior to living here, I lived in South Florida for 8 years and was a WX4 NHC operator with Julio and all the folks there, and volunteered with local EOCs there too. As you'll see here in the presentation, and by the way, this is a pre-recorded presentation, but we can still take questions and all that if we need to. Things are a lot different here in the Virgin Islands, a lot. I will qualify my statements in that I do not speak for the Virgin Islands government in any way, shape, or forms, and any opinions you hear are my own. I'm sure my friend Bob, K9VV, will approve of that. Our ARI system and our emergency system here is not very advanced compared to what we saw in Los Angeles. It's because we're the smallest section in the ARRL. We're undergoing a bit of an ARI's rebirth, and as you can imagine, after the storms, we licensed a whole bunch of new hams. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen and start the presentation. And let's see here. This is actually from the Governor's Hurricane Conference in New Orleans. Let me get back here to the right spot.
For Papa 2 X-ray, call we use in various contests and the like. Yeah, it was not a fun year in 2017 in the Virgin Islands. It's one thing to read about it, and it's another thing to be right in the middle of it. And as you can see, the Virgin Islands is kind of in the middle of the hurricane belt in the Caribbean. So where exactly is the USVI, our neighbors here? Or, oops, how about that? Puerto Rico. A lot of folks think that USVI,
They
you know,
should be showing the
just a little
presentation
bit past
here.
Miami or just past the Bahamas.
You are.
Well, we are due south of Halifax, believe it or not. And when we look at traveling, oh, it's just a flight to the West Coast, right? We're equidistant between San Francisco and Lisbon, Portugal. So flying to the West Coast for us is kind of like flying to Europe. We're also just north of Venezuela by about 450 miles or so, 600 clicks. We are territory of the United States, pre-storm, about 100,000 people. And quite a few of those have left. But the island is, the territory is doing much better. We do have 3 EOCs, which make for a little bit of a logistical challenge, especially knowing that one might be hit and the other may not. So you don't know which one's always going to be in charge. And then of course, when both of them get hit, then you have a little bit of a problem. I'll speak to that a little in a moment here. From a commercial standpoint, tourism is a very important part of our economy, as is distilling of rum. We have 2 distilleries on island and also a refinery, which is just about ready to come back online after several years of being out of service. So let's talk a little bit more from an emergency management perspective. As I said, we're islands, so you can't really evacuate anywhere. So we're told you need to shelter in place. And from an emergency management standpoint, we're a long way from the mainland where most of our resources are going to come from. And we're told, don't even plan on anybody showing up for 96 hours, a little longer than most. It's not like we have the county next door who can come and send firefighters or policemen, or state guard in any numbers. They're nowhere near us. So locally, we do have the Virgin Islands National Guard, numbering of approximately 400. And then of course our friends at FEMA, who we've got to know very well over the past couple of years or so. Our role in the Virgin Islands as amateurs is a little different than the traditional role that hams typically play. I say that because the government has, the Virgin Islands territorial government has no paid communicators. So the hams are it. We're the front line. So we're really functioning more as government communicators than hams, but we wear both hats. This is an example of the main EOC in St. Croix, which was totally constructed by hams from a pile of radio stuff that was going to get thrown out. I do want to comment, I meant to say it up front, I am not an employee of it is my own opinion only, and it does not reflect any way, shape, or form any government entity. So, totally built and staffed by hams. You can see we have, this is a Rockwell Collins HF for FEMA. We have one ham set here. There's a number of commercial trunk systems and other conventional repeaters that are there. And then our whiteboard here, which was our friend during these two storms. St. John has a much smaller EOC with much smaller population, and you can see they didn't fare too well. And believe it or not, the EOC is down here, so it was constantly raining on them for a week or so following the storm, but they stayed there. We had one ham who actually came back to St. John for the storm. Think about that. He knew it was a 5. He came back for it. This is his home station. Gilly NP2OW is his call, and he was our main link to St. John for the first week after the storm. Oh, wait a second. Let's back up. We've all taken our ICS classes, right? Well, training took on a whole new important meaning after these storms. We require anybody that's working in EOCs to have the core 1, 2, 7, and 8 classes. However, we encourage them to go on and take 300, 400, where you really get to use those skills in a realistic classroom scenario. And of course, they always throw all the crazy injects in, like, yeah, how about another Cat 5 coming to visit you right after one's already been there? Or how about your EOC getting flooded out and you have to move? Or how about somebody shooting fireworks at a helicopter pad? You know, just crazy things people do. But they make you think. How about that second to last one there? Your relief that comes to help you has to evacuate. And then guess what? These things can and do happen. And you're going to see some examples of that. So the hams are frontline communicators for the Emergency Management Agency. We not only build and operate these comm centers, we program radios and help out other agencies when they have questions, even federal folks like National Park Service, who we work very closely with, Fish and Wildlife, even FEMA. They come to us for help and we help them, they help us. One thing that's really important is we have a lot of hams sprinkled throughout the community, and ham radio enjoys a very good reputation in the Virgin Islands due to things like Hugo and other incidents of the past. Last one's kind of interesting there. This was something that we really didn't anticipate, but as we started seeing that we had a lot of helicopters landing at a single landing pad on the island of St. John, we put our hands up and said, hey, we need to help get some order out of chaos here. I'll talk about that in a second. It's all right. What do you do before a storm? Family first. You got to take care of your family, and you got to make sure you're prepared. Don't become a victim yourself. Go out and look at your entire pool of Aries hams. We have folks that come and live part-time on island and go back to the States or wherever. Who's going to be around? Who happens to be on vacation? Who's qualified? You might have a ham there, but I don't need to discuss the pitfalls of putting in an unqualified amateur in a very highly visible public function. And who can help and wants to help. So make your list up, schedule shifts, knowing they're going to change. We had one guy, he hit a telephone pole driving in on his first shift. He was out for the rest of the storm. Make your plan, it'll change, but at least you have a plan. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Irma. Irma came to the north of St. Croix. And you can see here's St. Croix is right here. And this is St. Thomas, St. John, and then BVI. So we got a glancing blow, but St. John and St. Thomas weren't so lucky. Fortunately, there was an awful lot of government media telling people to prepare. This is real. This is not your standard 1 or 2 that blows over and we don't pay much attention to it. I won't bore you with reading all these facts. I'm sure everybody can read, but this was a very strong storm. And believe it or not, the wind's not always the issue. The tidal surge out of these things was unbelievable, as you'll see in some of the other photos here. Twin eye walls, that was a little different twist that doesn't always come about. And I'm sure there'll be some folks talking about that later on that know much more about it. We didn't sit there and count it. We just read about it afterwards. So as I mentioned, St. John, St. Thomas got smacked really well. Even to the point of bark being stripped off of trees. That's pretty humbling when you see that. Only 4 deaths though from Irma. Come on. Oop, there we go. Here's some of the damage. This was a high rise in St. Thomas that actually had the, I think these were hallways where the end got blown out, and sadly one person perished there. This is a home in St. John. That's all that's left. It looks like the kitchen counter or something. And this is probably $7 million worth of boats over in Tortola. I think that's from the Moorings, a popular charter place. Okay, I talked about the landing zone management function that is not really something that we were intending. We have one helipad on the island of St. John that has a small medical center, and it seemed everybody wanted to get into and get out of St. John. So we went to the EMA, said, look, we got an issue, we'll need to tell us to go handle it. Here's another one of those things you never think about. How many of you sitting in the EMA would know how to give hand signals to a helicopter? I got 1, 2, 3. Okay, well, we managed to find an internet connection and teach it to a couple of hams and a security guard at the hospital. And guess what? That's in our list of next learnings for the next time. We had as many as 12 landings in a day. That may not seem like a lot. We had private choppers dropping people off, picking people up and animals and all that stuff. We had the military running what they call their air bridge, dropping off pallets of water and stuff like that. Gee, how long does one of those guys sit on the helipad and tie it up? But of course, medevacs were our main concern there. We had one incident where they had a med chopper coming from Puerto Rico, and it was very obvious when I was speaking to the chief that he was the chief, and what he said went. They said, I have 5 to 10 minutes of extra fuel on that chopper, and if that landing pad's not clear, I'm going to turn him around and bring him home. Yes, sir. We'll make sure it's clear. So these were some of the things that came up that were real important to us. Sadly, we didn't have comms with the choppers until the military choppers, until they went and found hams on the boats and said, yeah, you have an HT. So they were on our 2-meter repeater. It's kind of noisy when they were talking from the cockpit, but we were able to speak with them. Another learning, make sure you know what frequency those military choppers use. They didn't even have any standard aircom frequencies. And then, as I mentioned, make sure that landing zone is clear so you can, wait, chopper's got to be able to land first, right? This is a snapshot from Web EOC, which we use for managing. Here's a priority medevac, and right below it, we had some bonehead shooting off fireworks. No chopper's going to land if they see any of that. Thankfully, the police got on that one quickly. But again, you can't make this stuff up. It just happens. Oh. Here's another one. All those hundreds of FEMA workers that came to help out, guess what? See ya. Another one coming. We got to leave. This is one of the Coast Guard's larger ships in St. Thomas that you can see there's some pretty good surge to put a big ship up like that. on dry land. Hey, Julio, remember this? Julio was our buddy. What's going on, Julio? What's this thing gonna do? And sadly, this is what was coming our way. Guess what? This was the real thing. Kind of humbling, and thanks. Also, Ken's not here, but thanks to all the great folks at the Hurricane Center. Rob, Bobby, salute you guys. Okay, Maria was the big one. 10th strongest in history in the Atlantic. Again, I'm not going to bore you with reading the details here, but it messed a lot of things up. 95% of our utility poles in St. Croix were down. So you basically first start having to rebuild your entire electrical grid. We have very little power on the ground, but they're working to get more of it. Only 3 deaths. People listened. In fact, our governor got on the phone and said, if you're not going to shelter for the storm, at least tattoo your name and your social security number on your wrist so we can identify you. Guess what? That seemed to resonate very strongly with some of the islanders. Of course, after Maria came by us, off it went to Puerto Rico, and that's where most of the media function was, since you have so many more people there. Uh-oh, something happened here. Okay. I mentioned the storm surge. This is a 38-foot power yacht. This is a 50-foot catamaran, just by comparison. It's like these things were thrown around like toys. Here's some of these are live power poles. In fact, we had to stop a propane truck and say, look, don't go down that road. This actually was the hospital, kind of a la MASH. And this was one of the relief vehicles that can pump out 1,500 gallons of water a day for all the soldiers who were dispatched to the island afterwards. All right. I don't need to tell many folks in this room, but HURVAC is a great tool. It's the one I trust. It uses NHC data. You can read everything else you want, but when the push comes to shove, this is the one we go to. And it was amazingly accurate. So again, thanks to our friends at NHC. Okay, here's another one. Okay, got to close the EOC down and move it. Where's your plan? This is normally a water gut that's about 6-7 feet deep. It borders, this is the EOC parking lot right here. Had a big foam pole and a bunch of transformers and stuff fall into this thing and impede the water flow. It came within 4 inches of flooding out our EOC. Literally would be coming right to the Florida EOC. We did have 3/4 inch of water in the comms room, but that's another issue. It's kind of interesting. You get out of your cot and splash, splash. Just some of the things you deal with. Then when all this stuff blows over, guess what? You see that first chopper and you say, there's our boys. It's a very good feeling, trust me. And you look offshore and you see these big giant ships. I'll show you, well, in the next slide, you'll see the pictures of them. All this activity starts happening. We had to go find out, oh, who's sending all these choppers? When are they going to come? Can we like try and sequence some things? Think, oh, well, here's our flight ops plan. Excuse me, we don't know how to read it. Can you help us? Well, it's kind of humbling walking up to a commander of some big DOD, I think it was Region 2, saying, hi, I'm Fred the Ham guy, even after you walk into a big door that says DOD only. And anyway, they worked with us very well. But it was really nice to have that support, especially ARRL was right there. How many HF kits you want? We said, just give us 2. We have enough radio equipment on the island. And once we found out how bad Maria hit Puerto Rico, we said, send those there. This was a long haul, 2,300 hours in a little over a month. And then came the Army, the linemen, they're local heroes here. And to this day, we still have billions in grant money and relief and everything still pouring into the territory. Here's the 3 ships, the 3 main ships. I'll talk about here in a little bit. We had daily nets with them on 60 meters, 5 megahertz location. After these things, information is key. There's such a vacuum. People want to know just simple stuff. When's the air, what's curfew? What's the port condition? Just getting that information out is so important. FEMA saw this as an HF event. They knew the infrastructure wasn't there to support it properly. So they got Mr. Potter, Chairman Pai at the FCC to grant a special temporary authorization for the ships to use 60 meters. And if you look at any of these AF, 4 EMA, those are all FEMA call signs. And that's where we had the majority of our interface with the military folks from DOD. So we support Puerto Rico. Believe it or not, we had a number of supporting roles to Puerto Rico after they got hit too. Look at that bottom one. One repeater, one ham repeater in the whole territory was left. And we were doing HT level coverage to that chopper pad on St. John, 40 miles. Wasn't always perfect. Let's talk a little bit more about all the communication that's going on. We listen to the FEMA guys and they're, Roger, yep, okay. They kind of dictatious, but we're hams, right? Every log's got to be a golden log. In the contesting community, that means no errors. And when people's lives are involved, you really got to be sure it's right. One really important thing I remembered, and many of my the staff that were working with us there thought it was nuts. But when it really gets important, slow down. The FEMA guys were looking at us like we were nuts, but guess what? We made sure that traffic was right. We had a 24-year-old female who had DKA. I happened to be on the radio. 24-year-old female DKA, medevac from blah, 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 blah. DKA, let me confirm. Is that Delta Kilo Alpha? Well, yeah, DKA. No. Well, let me confirm again. Delta Kilo Alpha. Well, yeah. Diabetic ketoacidosis. No, let me confirm again. Delta Kilo Alpha. Please confirm yes or no. It's so important. She made it, by the way. Good feeling. Other things, try and anticipate what the person's going to ask you. If they order something, do you guys need this or that to go with it? Now, that's maybe overreaching our mantra a bit as just communicators, but it's important to try and get as much information as you can. Because a lot of times those folks at the other end, they're under as much stress as you are and aren't thinking about it. Or you have the visibility that the EOC is looking for certain things, and this may be a person that could point you in the right direction. Let's see. Yeah, pay attention to the things that can easily be misunderstood or miscopied. Directions, quantities. We ordered 10 cases of water, not 100. And it happens, trust me. We've seen it. Stay calm. Believe me, it's real easy to feel that emotion on the other end, but keep your cool. It also makes that person on the other end very calming also. You guys do a great job on the hurricane of that. Somebody's methodical, friendly. So again, congratulations. We actually didn't do a lot of weather tracking as weather reporting as we are more involved on the government side. You never know who's going to be on the end of the microphone. If they can go fast, give it to them fast, as long as it's golden log there. Have your MCOM call history. Make sure if they say call Public Works, or I need the number for this or that, or who do I call at the Hurricane Center, that you have all that information beforehand. It's real easy to do. Make sure you take care of yourself, get enough sleep, stay hydrated, get enough food, don't burn yourself out. don't burn yourself out. It's real easy to do. You're not Superman. We're not as young as we used to be, you know. Can't stay out all night anymore, kids. And then there's the final bullet there. That's the payoff. The multipliers in a contest, or, you know, states or countries or whatever. But here it's how many lives did we save? How many people did we connect? And how many people did we comfort? Kind of along that same line. To me, this happens to be one of the most enjoyable pieces of our hobby, is doing something I like doing to help people out. And it's really cool when people say, hey, thanks. You know, we appreciate what you guys do. And some want to make superheroes and all that stuff. It's like, no, guess what? This is what we train for. This is what we do. We're looking for. And the FCC recognizes this too. That's why we get access to all these billions and billions of dollars of radio spectrum that fill in your favorite cell carrier pays a lot of money for a piece of paper for a license. These guys are all over the sky like mosquitoes, man. The amount of stuff they can bring in is unreal. Our local airport was transported into a military base 24/7. They brought in a lot of stuff. People say, what was it like? Well, I said it was kind of like being somewhere between a KOA campground and a Super 8. We were out of power for 105 days. This was some signs that folks put up. This is around Christmas. Christmas had a sense of humor, and they said, hey, you know, the guys, they're still visible today, rebuilding the power grid. Kind of a typical morning down at the local supermarket of these guys, a whole army of them. And the locals really appreciate them too. In the end, though, you know, it all begins with people. These are some folks from National Park Service. Actually, one of these guys became a ham. I'll talk about that in a second. This is, we had one ham come from the States to help us, George, and one Echo Zulu. And these are some of the local linemen here. Bet you haven't heard this before, right? Anybody under age 50 here? 1, 2. Enough said. Embrace those new hams. We've had quite a bit of activity. These are some school kids. Oops, I'm sorry, wrong one. We actually have a couple school kids that started a ham club in their grade school in St. John. They love to go to school with their HTs, and the teachers try and bust them, say, you can't have a cell phone. They say, nope, these are amateur radio. So, and they already have permission from the principal to put antennas up. So a lot of good things going on. A lot of great folks that have given time to upgrade, become VEs. And it's really neat seeing these new hams get into it. You know, we remember what it was like. Okay, from an infrastructure standpoint, I mentioned we had one repeater. So we have our 3 main islands here, St. John, St. Thomas, and St. Croix. I was fortunate to get a grant. We purchased new Bridgecom repeaters and SCOM controllers. And the intent was to link all these things using a VHF backbone. I'm happy to say all but one of these repeaters are in place and functioning. We do have Echolink and IRLP going. Still needs some fine tuning on squelch tails and things, but at least it's working. That's a good thing. We can control any link, take any repeater up or down using DTMF tones from anywhere in the system. The next step is to each of these controllers, wherever it is, the controllers have 3 ports on them, so we're looking for some interop opportunities to interface with our favorite NIFOG frequencies or local whoever. So a lot more growth that we can do there. Anyway, this has been the main focus. Following this, we're going to revamp our mesh network. activities to create a network of last resort. We know the fiber never fails and everything else doesn't go down, but just in case. So if we have any DRADS experts out there, I'd love to talk to you about that. But that's kind of what's coming. We have had up to a 47-mile path on 2 gigs between the islands.
I'm so sure.
Sorry. So we're looking forward to revamping that mesh network into the world. So what will we do different next time? You saw that big whiteboard. We're going to create a lot of automated things to make that a little better. We lose a lot of history when we wipe things off, like our last 24 and next 24 goals and all that business. So we'd like to automate that. We had a lot of rescue vehicles that didn't have radios in them, and they were coming to us during the storm, which kind of detracted a little bit from our activity. Always helps to have some cash portables to hand out to folks when they show up. I mentioned a thing about making sure we could talk to the Navy helos and other air traffic. We do have the standard air traffic frequencies, but FAA pretty much shut down. It was crazy in the air after the storms. Recording's real important to go back through your AARs and figure out what to improve next time. And then battery backup, even the EOC, excuse me, the generator at the EOC failed a few times. So we're going to get our own and get on solar power and all that kind of good stuff. We're going to hold the questions until later on. However, could I take one or two? I have time to take one or two. Okay, good. Any questions folks have? I know you're all out too late last night. Going once, twice. Okay.
Okay, let me get this figured out here in just a second. Is the screen off? Is my screen still sharing?
All right,
Yes,
so
it
it's
is.
11:48
No, it's
now.
not.
So I
No,
think
it's
we'll
not.
do
Okay.
Graham, the director of the National
Let me kill the video
coming
then.
at 1, because I think we'll still take our break now. It gives everybody roughly an hour, or a little bit more of an hour to grab something. And
There we go. Sorry about that.
Okay,
Okay.
now we need to see you.
Okay. Yep. Start video. There we go. I'm back.
Oh,
I will share one other thing. I talked about some of the interesting things that we were looking to do with Puerto Rico. Oscar's probably wondering what they were too. One of them was this one right here. We had kind of a brainchild at FEMA who had this idea of, and actually we kind of borrowed it from the Philippines. I think they do this. They actually fly around banner tow planes with the banner of if you need help and you've got a radio, go to 5.2 or FRS channel 1. And then we relay those signals through a crossband repeater, which is the 2 handhelds there. And it kind of goes something like this. So you have somebody on the ground. They actually reach the airplane, which in turn relays it to the first responders, which in turn go and note where the person is and drop rescue, food and water, so on and so forth. All but about, I think all the banner tow planes, there were 6 or 8 of them in Puerto Rico. We looked at having the, not Coast Guard. No, it was the not Air National Guard. Help me out here. Who's the auxiliary? Oh, Civil Air Patrol, I'm sorry. We looked at having Civil Air Patrol do this, and then when it was evident what we weren't going to be able to find resources that could do what we needed locally, I actually went and was pretty well down the road of raising enough funds to have a banner tow plane fly from Florida and do this for a week. Now, Puerto Rico is a big place. You wouldn't just go and fly all over Puerto Rico. So here's another one of those weird things. Went to our commanding officer of Southcom who was there from the DOD, and I said, got a weird radio thing for you. I know you guys have lots of electronics on your ships and probably guys that need something to do. Here's a list of the inputs and the outputs of amateur radio repeaters. I would like to know, I don't need to know anything about them other than whether there's activity on the channels or not. This would tell us which repeaters were working and which ones weren't. And from that, we could determine where to fly these flights. Unfortunately, it was a week plus following the storm, and the hinterlands of Puerto Rico were starting to get the relief that they needed. So unfortunately, we scrapped that. However, we still have the HTs and everything for next time if we need to do that. So with that, unless anybody wants to see what 230-mile-an-hour winds do to antennas and towers, that everybody's seen damage. But I guess we'll go ahead and throw it open for questions, comments, or anything else anybody would like to talk about.
Yeah, hi, this is Mike, W7VO. I got a real quick question. One of the things you talked about in there was the ability for the hams to have ICS 300 and 400. And my question is, since you're on that remote island, what are your opportunities there to give your Aries people those classes?
In the 10 years I've been here, or actually in probably the last 3 years, that 300 and 400 class has been given 3 or 4 times. And we have certified instructors on island. Some are in the National Guard, some are within the EMA to do that. There was a very obvious effort by FEMA to make any training necessary that we needed. And knowing the ability of the territory to respond and effectively take care of itself, FEMA has really, one of the biggest things that came out of this is FEMA basically combined the recovery, let me get back, what are the 4 stages? There's the event, the recovery, and the, I'm missing my words here, essentially the rebuilding. They essentially started combining the 2 phases, which normally hadn't been combined before. And they recognize that the VI and Puerto Rico, especially after these 2 storms, are kind of a new norm, that FEMA has since readjusted their own internal offerings and support mechanisms to do so. For example, they've put in a four-repeater system, and they're leaving a lot of normally. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot harder to get those here at Stateside because you're in constant competition with you know, all the first responders. They're first in line, and you guys having a smaller population, it's great you have that resource available to you. Great presentation, by the way. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Hi, Fred.
Any other questions, comment? Yes, ma'am. Hi, Lee.
Hi. Yeah, I've got a quick question. You used fixed stations with pre-established antennas. Did you find a need at any point for deploying a station out in the field? If you'd had the resources, would you have done that? HF.
Number one, we did have the resources. HF, we did not need to. There are enough amateurs sprinkling. You got to remember the VI is very small. As an example, St. Croix is 9 miles by 27 miles, so you know, probably about as big as a small slice of the LA metro area. So we have hams that basically live in many of the desired areas. There's one little island in the middle of the harbor of St. Thomas. If any of you have ever taken cruise ships and stopped there, there's actually a couple of them, but they have about 100 people that live on one island. We had 13 situational reports within the first 24 hours after the storm on that island of 100 people. So the hams have pretty good coverage, and we did not have the need to deploy any HF stations.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Other
Yeah.
questions? You guys are easy.
Well, if I may, real quick, because you highlighted a couple of really, and thank you so much for the presentation, giving us a lot to think about, because one of the things is always preparing for the next disaster. And I mean, one of the points we're trying to drive home is this is the experience of hurricanes, and I've lived in Florida for 10 years, is in spite of the fact that one, you're used to hurricanes, two, you see them coming and it still did all this damage. So that's, I think, number one, that's a great takeaway from this. The other one, and I think you've pointed that out a couple of times, amateur radio operators are a natural mesh network. They're self-configuring, self-adjusting nodes, if you will, and that makes a whole lot of difference. So have you looked into creating what the Germans call kind of the lighthouse approach, where you have people locally with FRS radios that come to a central point like a park and whatnot, and there's a ham there who then connects to the next layer of that response. Is that something you guys considered?
I should probably start out by saying there is essentially no functional CERT or really BOED organization here of any size. The organizations are here, but they're really not much use after the storm because they're just not well enough organized in the community. Our approach is somewhat different than what you described. The approach, if we fast forward on mesh, the approach was to have a backbone of mesh networks either located at the houses of amateurs or what I'll call friendly, intelligent users who can re-aim antennas, take them down, understand how to read an LED, so on and so forth. And then the intent was, should we have to deploy anywhere, we would take portable mesh nodes. I actually have something called the Kitty Go Kit, which is another story. Repurposing these cat litter containers as self-contained mesh nodes. So that was kind of the next step. You heard me mention DRATs once. This was a while ago. Oliver, I definitely will want to speak with you more. Certainly WinLink, I am convinced now, is the way to go. And again, being in the smallest ARRL section, the gentleman who I was doing all the mesh with on St. Thomas, he moved off island. That was 3 or 4 years ago. So it's really kind of been on ice. Thankfully, we have a young upcoming ham that has a very strong data background and is already playing with a lot of these things. So he watched your presentation on LA, and he and I have been going back with a lot of good ideas. And if you wouldn't mind acting as a resource to bounce some ideas off, we would certainly appreciate that. But that's kind of what we're thinking right now. I did mention that you saw in the presentation, WebEOC, the current line of thinking and the current method now is all paper forms. WebEOC, as simple as it might sound for all of you power users, it is just too challenging for many folks here. They had loads of training on it 3 years ago and haven't done anything with it. So hopefully the EOC will get with the times and in fact, we were logged into it and submitting all our tickets, and we were told, don't submit any more tickets, you're submitting too many tickets. Oh, I guess, Scott, I see that. I don't know if that was you had a question or I guess that's a thumbs up, so.
Scott's got a question, and there's another question in the, I think that's what Scott's gonna say. So go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, it was just to let you know there is a question in the chat room.
Okay, spectrum deconfliction, RF interference. No, there was no power on the island, so we had no issues. In fact, the stars were really bright.
I have a question and a couple comments, if that's okay.
Yes, sir, please.
So first of all, when you say mesh, are you talking about the amateur radio emergency data network or wireless internet service provider frequency?
Yeah, fair ask. I have, I don't know, probably 10 or 20 routers in various states of configuration. And like I said, played with it a few years ago. This was back when it was HSMM mesh, all using the WRT 54 routers. We have not really gotten beyond that. When we linked the 2 islands, we were using 2-watt PAs that had 10 dB preamps in them. And I have quite a bit of hardware and stuff that once we get folks that are savvy enough to put all this stuff together and want to use it as a club project, we'll be taking all that and deploying it. But it's all still the old 2.4 gig 802.11 stuff.
Well, if you check in on ardnmesh.org, AREDN mesh.org, they're doing some fairly sophisticated stuff that, might be permanently established and useful for the amateur community, and can also be used to serve public service and, emergency management agencies.
Sure, I'm familiar with them. The biggest thing is resource limitation. Let's see.
It's not an easy. It's not an easy climb either. So you need a geek or two basically to set them up for you and configure them the first time through. And then
sure. Well, the good thing is the geeks don't have to be in the territory here. Another project. One of the first ones was to create an IP VoIP hotline between the two EOCs, two main EOCs, and let's see, there was another question here. Was shares used at all? No, we did not use shares. We were so preoccupied with passing traffic for the BI government. We did support TSA. Actually, one of our hams works there, but we sent them some radios and got the airport back online. Went out and rebuilt some antennas. So it was a very different mission. I think we maybe passed a dozen pieces of health and welfare traffic. In fact, when I went to the EOC and I said, where do you want to send all the queries for health and welfare traffic? I didn't get an answer. So I put up there, we'll go to, what's the Red Cross site, Safe and Well or something like that. So they wrote that up, and then somebody else in the next shift had crossed all that off. So you can see there's still a lot of dysfunctional pieces that are evident from an organization that is very resource limited and doesn't have a lot of talent. You got to remember that the whole territory is only 100,000 people. So take your favorite city of 100,000 near you and think about how many of these resources they would have, and then isolate it on an island, and it's even more of a challenge.
Hey, Fred, this is
Yes,
Jack. Hi, this is Jack WM Zergy.
Yep.
One of the things that we have used we have a mobile trailer. I don't know if you talked to, when you talked to Robert, he might have alluded to that thing. But what we have utilized, kind of a poor man's EOC, is using Google Docs and putting up a big spreadsheet on an Excel, and every request that comes in gets put up there, and and you can see which ones are still open, which ones are still left, and what time they came in, et cetera, et cetera. So it works out pretty well, especially you can utilize it for bike races and, whatever other thing you do as well. But it's a good way of keeping track of what's going on and where you're getting the request from, and whether it's been completed or not. And Google Docs, as long as you got internet up, I guess, works pretty damn good.
Yeah, this is one of the key things. We had internet very spotty. Sometimes we'd have to jump on the FEMA satellite system. We do have 30 some odd foot command bands that were not even deployed. But one of the biggest things for anything that's mesh or anything else, ideally, for example, what we'd like to do for linking our repeaters, we would have 3 means of linking the repeater system you saw in the diagram there. One is the existing UHF, another would be internet based, and the third would be mesh based. So unfortunately, anything that depends on the internet is I can't depend on it here. You got to remember, I didn't have power for 105 days at home. So your infrastructure is really, really, really beat up.
True.
Three more questions about utilizing aviation resources.
Sure.
Okay, first of all, did you find that the Civil Air Patrol backed away from towing banners as politely as they could and as rapidly as they could?
No. If we would have gotten them, they would have towed them.
Huh. Okay. I'm pleasantly surprised to hear that. And did you give any thought to use those little crossband or handhelds? If you don't really need FAA approval in a situation like that to have small external antennas and just circle an area to provide communications on whatever frequency you're allowed to use, amateur or otherwise. You put an aircraft up at 10,000 feet, it's better than any repeater you've got.
Sure.
And-
We had to be cognizant of number one, what our mission was, and number two, the fact that we had very limited resources. I have done aviation operation, grid square hopping, and we did have a quarter wave 2 meter whip on an NMO mount on an inspection plate. But you have to remember, this whole idea of the airborne repeaters came after our infrastructure and everything was just totaled. One of the guys says, "Hey, I got these things. I'll get them programmed up. You go get the planes, and maybe we can put this thing together."
And my last comment was, I think pretty much every EMS agency in the country has got some kind of card for landing zone officer responsibilities, and every EMT and paramedic, I think, is cross-trained to act as an LZO. So if you
Okay,
could,
well, let me stop you. I mentioned things are different. They have just started the process of having EMS and fire become one organization. So our firemen are not trained EMTs. You know, it's very dysfunctional here in many ways. Plus, we have very few people. Remember, go back to that city of 100,000 and think about it.
now, my point is the LZO component is about a 20-minute tutorial, and there are little cards that you can carry around to remind you, because nobody's a full-time LZO. And
Sure. The article, whoever wrote that article a year or so ago in QST about the exercise of setting up a landing zone and all that, I was like, boy, you're right up the alley. I mean, this was something we weren't even thinking about fathoming. And we told them, we said, look, this is an issue.
yeah, well, if you can plan for it, it's not an emergency. What can I say? It sounds like you
Go get somebody to
Roy
do
does.
it, and they didn't do anything. We said, fine, then let us do it. And well, and here's the real scary part. There are no incorporated radio clubs within the VI, and Aries is not incorporated. So we had no liability insurance for doing any of this. Thanks to Jack W and Zero G, I was able to speak with Bob N0ESQ, who was the attorney who passed that Auxcom bill. And then I actually spoke with K3RF, another Bob. And I have written a draft bill that I am just about ready to go to our senators and try and get it passed. And it essentially forms Auxcom, gives us either limited, if not total, tort immunity, and also we're asking for workers' comp at the same time. So it's either that or find some money to purchase an individual liability policy. And there's very few companies that will write those types of policies. The ARRL, as I mentioned before, will not. Their insurance carrier that insures all the other Aries group they do not write insurance here, nor do they have any interest in doing so. Again, it's 100,000 people, so a lot of moving parts.
Hey, Fred.
Yeah.
Hi, Dale. Yes, sir.
I kind of share your pain. I was down there. I worked for National Park Service back in the old days, and during the early to mid 80s, I was down there doing hurricane recovery. And it sounds like your situation's a bit improved from when it was then, but I fully understand what you're facing, and that island location and being away from everything. What works over here on the mainland is just a pipe dream. It doesn't happen over there. And I know you know that, and I can say from experience, I've experienced it. But anyway, thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Happy to do so. We have a saying, and it goes, you just can't make this stuff up. Some of the stuff that happens, it's like, is what it is. So if there aren't any other questions,
I got a question. This is Mike W7VO. I live in a fairly rural county here in Oregon, and they've told us that when the big Cascadia rising quake comes and it terrorizes the coast and wipes out the westernmost parts of Oregon and Washington, that 99% of the resources are going to wind up that FEMA provides and relief agencies provide is going to be going into Portland, because that's where all the people are. And I can kind of tell from you said, you know, they basically told you guys that take 4 days for relief to come. And that's the same thing they're telling us. They're telling us that with you know, 90% of Oregon's population being in the Portland metro area, they're going to get all the resources before anybody does, literally by weeks. Now you had a similar situation kind of with Maria, where you had Puerto Rico sitting right there next door, and I'm just wondering how they were treated in your event versus where you were on the smaller, more remote island. What was the actual delay time there compared to what was going into Puerto Rico?
Well, I think you have to look at the fact, yes, it was the same storm, but the situation in Puerto Rico was far, far different. Due to Puerto Rico's larger size, I'm sure we all saw it on the news, the inability to get to that heavily damaged inner mountain. And if Oscar's still here, I'm sure he can tell you. But FEMA, like any relief organization, has to look at the assets they have that they can deploy and where they will do the most good, so to speak. And if I had to guess on a per capita basis, or however you want to measure it, we probably had a far greater response because we're much smaller and easier to take care of than they are in Puerto Rico. But in terms of media coverage, I can tell you the 99% of the media coverage was all Puerto Rico, just because of the sheer size and the stronger connection to the mainland U.S.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Well, I guess I've bored everybody enough.
No, you're not bored anybody. Anybody else got any questions here?
This is Paul in Vermont, and I've got to call it a night.
Okay, Paul.
Got to get up early for work in the morning.
This is George from East Pennsylvania. I'm wondering about HF that you had in the islands. I was a Saturn NCS during the Irma and Maria, and I remember very little contact on HF with the Virgin Islands, but I had a lot of contact with Puerto Rico. Is HF part of your plan down there, or do you use long-range communications?
HF is part of the plan, definitely. You have to remember that our population is much smaller, and hence we won't have the health and welfare traffic also that you would in a larger area. You also have to remember that our role, we're really like frontline communicators for the VI government. So instead, not that we wouldn't have done health and welfare traffic, but we are doing things like, I actually did what I called the Polish phone patch, when we did have phones that worked, where we would hold the cell phone up to the microphone, and we had police commissioners on each island talking to each other about staffing and crime and this and that, and we just didn't have the bandwidth to do any of the traditional health and welfare type traffic.
Well, initially after the storms, we did very little health and welfare. We tried to minimize that, and we were involved with getting relief supplies and relaying messages to the appropriate people to get relief into some of the isolated areas. One of the hams I worked was taking his battery out of his car and using it until it started to run down, then putting it back in the car and running the car to charge it up. So I know things were pretty rough. That was on Puerto Rico. I'm afraid I can't really remember, other than talking to a ham in St. Thomas, but I don't remember what we talked about.
Well, we were just too busy taking care of internal communications for the Virgin Islands government. That's everybody from the hospitals to human services to the Department of Health to waste management to Port Authority. That was our mainstay, and then of course interfacing with FEMA and attending all the briefings and all this kind of thing. So our mission is vastly different, I think, than many others. And, you know, that's just the way it is. Every place is different. And the role of amateurs in every place is determined by the need from the EMAs. And as an example, where I used to live in South Florida, the county has gone and told the hams, we don't need you anymore. They have paid communicators that go to all the Red Cross shelters and everything. They don't even need the hams. So every place is different.
Yeah, I know everybody that does emergency communications has a unique situation, but I just recall one of the situations I was in with talking with Puerto Rico. One of the hams in a remote location contacted me to contact San Juan to get some water out because their local water supply had been contaminated by a diesel spill. So it was interesting, and after about 2 or 3 days, we started getting health and welfare messages, but it was pretty hectic and little anxiety ridden the first couple of days. But thank you very much, and I really appreciate your presentation.
Good. Glad you enjoyed it. And yes, it was a long haul.
Else? Anybody else?
Yeah, K9VV Joe Kleber from Hawaii. I apologize. I missed about 40%, the first 40 minutes of your presentation. I had a freezer refrigerator emergency. Could you, first of all, the first question I have is your presentation will be available as a YouTube presentation that we can access?
It's on YouTube. It's on YouTube. I can send the link to Dan if he'd like to. It was actually given at the 2019 Governor's Hurricane Conference in New Orleans, and the entire presentation for amateur radio, they have a number of presenters, and I was just one of several. So yes, it's available on YouTube. I'll get Dan the link, and he can share it with everyone.
Okay,
that's okay,
great.
Dan.
The other question I have is how many hams were activated in your situation there?
We had about 7 that did that 2,300 hours at the main EOC on St. Croix. We had others that were in their homes and helped.
Yeah.
We had no hams in the St. Thomas EOC or the St. John EOC. One of our hams on St. John, the gentleman I told you who came back, he did drive one of his pickup trucks that had the windshield blown out up to the EOC to give them a radio because they had no comms. But other than that, again, we're a very small territory, and we have a lot more hams. We've licensed about 75 new hams since the storms. In fact, there was one time we have daily weather nets and weekly Aries nets, and on one of our Aries nets, we had 30 check-ins, 30 KP2. So it's really taken off, and we're kind of rebuilding a lot of what maybe used to have been in the islands.
Okay, so you have about 70 licensed hams, and only seven of them were activated, were able to perform communication situations?
We had 7 of them in the EOC. We had plenty of people at their homes that were giving situational reports.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I missed the presentation. My repairman is here, so I have to sign out. Aloha to everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Say hello to my longtime friend, Ron Hashiro, for me, AH6RH.
Right. I know him. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Aloha.
Aloha.
Fred, you can,
yes, sir.
If you like, in your in the chat session there, you can put the link to that URL if you have it available. Otherwise, send it to me and I'll get it out to everybody.
Yep. You know what? I'll have to get it. I'll have to get it to you. For some reason, it's not here on the video. Yeah. Sorry about that. I'll get it.
No problem. I'll send a copy of this video afterwards, and I will include that link so everybody will have it.
Well, if there's nothing else, thanks everybody. I always enjoy these things. I've learned a lot, and happy to share whatever knowledge I can. And again, Ollie, I'll definitely be talking to you. Auf
Looking
Deutsch kann
forward to
auch.
it. Pardon?
Ja, auf Deutsch, das ist sicher möglich.
Das können wir machen. Sure. I'm looking forward to it. I think we're thinking along the same lines. And one of the things we're right now experimenting with is trying to use Zello and interfacing that, because a lot of first responders use that. And if we can provide them an easy way to use tech they're already familiar with into our networks, that might be something to look forward to. And we actually, Aries LAX just got a Zello account as a first responder account, right? There you go. We actually have a bi-monthly net now on Zello. How cool is that?
Oscar, can you comment on Zello? I think you guys use it in Puerto Rico, don't you?
Yeah, but we have 98% of the communication lost, no internet at all. So that was gone with the wind.
Okay, I'm in discussion with a gentleman. I don't know how far he got, but he was essentially writing his own version of Zello that would function independently of the web without a server. At this point, I think he only has it working on a single AP, and some other things in his life pulled him away from it. But as you heard me say, anything that's internet-based is icing, but you still need the cake. So it has to be able to be a standalone solution for us.
Let me show you something.
For us, it really works the 146.52 in VHF. That's what we have.
Everybody was on the power company, the police.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that works because we have so many stations that they serve as relay, and that works very well. No interference at all. Everybody was very polite and very organized. Everybody was transmitting the traffic very properly.
Yeah. One other thing that's probably not surprising, the VI does not have any representation at NTS. We just don't have enough folks. If I had to guess, there's maybe 10 people in the whole territory that know the CW. Not that you have to know CW to be part of NTS. Territory-wide, we probably have about 325 amateurs, of which about half just have the call sign or only here part-time. So it's a very, very small pool. And something else, we're actually starting to give VE tests to folks from the British Virgin Islands. They come over. Oliver, you were holding something up, your phone?
Yeah, we need to talk about this. This is LinPhone. And it actually is, we use it to essentially unbrick all our smartphones, because that's what they are, bricks, when really everything goes down. And we've been demonstrating that for fire departments, for instance, and they love the idea of it. There's one town, Monterey Park Fire Department. One of their operations chief comes from the wildland fire, so he's pretty much seen it all, what can go wrong really quickly. And we had him up and running in 2 minutes, and he said, okay, I want this for the entire city. And this is mesh based, so as long as you have a mesh connection, and if you have Go kits, your problems are solved. And with the new MikroTics HAPs for short distances, that's perfect. One of the things that we found, though, is using HTs on 2 meters and WinLink over mesh, for instance, is a great combination. So bringing this together as kind of a multi-approach works really, really well. And then, as you said,
go ahead. No, so my vision is something like this. You have a disaster. You have a first responder who shows up. Let's say it's Oscar. Oscar shows up. He says, I'm here to help. I said, Oscar, what's your name and your phone number? And he gives it to me. And then in 30 seconds, or when you type his name into the system, he gets a text with a password for his voicemail. He gets a password for the AP that's already there. He gets a little overview on, here's all the chat rooms for the different support groups or agencies or whatever. And everybody's got a phone, and it's a great piece of terminal equipment to be able to utilize in a field environment. So, I mean, it would be great to have something like that.
Let's
That would be
investigate that
nirvana.
together, because I think we can actually come up with some really phenomenal solutions for this that we haven't even thought of yet. So it's a process of discovery.
Yeah, we have some pretty sharp data folks in our section. One gentleman was part of a group who wrote some ENG, electronic news gathering software that's used by over 50% of the world's media organizations. So I think maybe we should have a little brainstorming organization with a meeting with a few of these guys, and kind of come up and compare notes. Anybody else?
One thing that might be of interest to folks here is tomorrow night, same time, same place, we're going to have San Diego people on here. A gentleman by the name of Rob Freeburn, I believe it is, that at K6 RJF, and they're going to be talking about their WinLink and all the stuff they're doing over there in San Diego, and I'm sure we can tie a lot of this together and get additional information. That's tomorrow, same time, same place.
Well, I guess that's probably the end. Dan, thank you again so much for doing this. It's really, really neat. It's a lot of fun.
Well, thank you. Really do appreciate it. Oliver's clapping over there, and so some others. Yeah, you did a real good job. Appreciate it very much. And send me that link, and I'll be sure to get it out to everybody. And unless somebody's got something else, we'll close this down for the night.
Yeah, one just quick side comment to Bob, K3RF. I found the right guy who's got 3 senators in the pocket for sure. They're ex-cops. They understand the importance of communication. So we're looking good on that front.
Okay. Is there anybody else that's got anything? Okay, I will close this down for the night. Those that can make it tomorrow night, I'll see you then. And we'll go from there. 73s, everyone.
All right, 7-3.
Thank you.
33 from W3 GWM.
73. Good night.
Good night.